Hello, and welcome to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. Catherine Torpey is the executive director of the International Focusing Institute, with headquarters in Nyack, New York. She came to the Institute 2 years ago, when it began its transition from having been led by its founder, Eugene Gendlin, and his wife, Mary Hendricks. The Institute is an international cross-cultural organization dedicated to supporting individuals and groups worldwide who are teaching and developing felt sense focusing and its underlying philosophy. Catherine has been a practitioner of focusing for 20 years and is also an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister. I'd like to get into a little bit of a conversation of focusing and faith.
Okay.
I'll just share this one story, and it's the story of when Jesus walks on water, and it's this. When we hear that story, it's about the miracle. It's about walking on water. It's very often interpreted as, a moment of tremendous faith. But as I was contemplating that story once, the thing that struck me was that the first step was not the big leap of faith. Like if he put his right foot forward, the massive leap of faith was when he let his other foot come off the boat.
That's beautiful. I love that. That's beautiful.
Right? Like that both, like there was not that moment when one foot was still on the boat, was still not completing the wholeness of that leap of faith. That foot had to come off. And I had this image. I had, like, sometimes in focusing, we get these beautiful images. And that was in maybe not even in a non-focusing moment, but the image of that second foot coming off and the instant realization that completes the story, that there's a immense power in that. But because you shared that story, I wanted to share this one, because I've always felt, and I've often sometimes told friends or something, and say, you've only got one foot in the water here. You haven't really lifted the other one off. And do you really trust that if you lift that other one off, you're going to be okay? So
yeah, and again, one of the things that just made me fall in love with focusing was that we have every right not to put that second foot in the water. That the foot, that experience of being. I love that image. Of having one foot in and one foot out in that moment of I'm not sure where to go. That is the focusing. That's the focusing moment.
Yeah.
Where you're unsure, where it's not clear, where there's multiple, where part of you wants to be in the water and part of you wants to be safe, and it's all worthy of your love and attention and compassion. The scared part has just as much a right to be there. And sometimes, it's just such a beautiful, the respectfulness of focusing, that we never push ourselves, because if we push ourselves to do something, then we are cutting ourselves off from a part of us that's saying that there's something there I'm not comfortable with. And then the question is, okay, so we don't have to put this second foot in the water.
It's about where. I mean, the word identity comes to mind there. It's like, we can be identified completely with that part that pushes us towards. Where in a focusing process, we can recognize that there's something there pushing, but that there's this something else that's, and we can be there for as long as it needs to be.
And we can go back in the boat if we want.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
to assume that the superior choice is to have put both feet on the water is to not be fully present
Mm-hmm.
to everything that's happening. It's there's something there that's making us feel that to walk on the water is somehow the superior choice. And that also, everything, this is the thing that I loved so much when I learned focusing, everything is equal.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a way into the felt sense. So if the way that I was taught was we would ask, is it, if I'm facilitating another person focusing, the question, the way I was taught it is, if when something's there, is it okay to be with it? So,
Mm-hmm.
and if the answer is no, that is 1,000% fine. It's if okay, so is it okay to be with no? I can't be with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
this is why I think, also focusing really has a social justice and it's there's a component of it that is so anti-oppression
Yeah.
because I really believe that we can, with focusing, inculcate in ourselves and each other paying attention to that little voice, because so often in the world, I think what happens with whether it's an individual experience of an individual person who's treating us disrespectfully in whatever way, or whether it's a systemic, if there's some systemic problem in whether it be in a workplace, institution, or the political system, when there's that
Mm-hmm.
something inside does not feel like this is okay, focusing really inculcates in us that that is of supreme importance, that that little voice is not to be suppressed, not to be ignored. Uh,
Yeah, because it's connected somehow to our sense of rightness,
mhm,
to that whole sense of what the right next right best thing is. And there's a consideration of so much internally, which creates a kind of an atmosphere for the right way forward for
mm,
every individual. It's also, maybe you could just talk about that, how sort of some feelings are universal, and I totally empathize with so much of what I'm hearing. But then it's also a very individual and personal experience, and it happens at a speed that is individual for for each person,
mhm,
based on their own experiences.
mhm.
Maybe, could you talk a bit about that?
The it being, when you say it is different for each person, do you mean the experience of the felt, going into the felt sense and maybe a shift coming? Is that what you mean by the it, or?
Yeah, I sort of mean the it in the wholeness of like focusing for each person's individual focusing experience.
Mm,
While there can be sort of some feelings that are easy to relate to once people have had some time internally, still that internal focusing experience is so personal and
Hmm.
so precious. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's right. So I'm not sure if this is directly answering the question, but what comes to me in response is is to say that through focusing, what I have observed in myself and in others is that because I have learned to so deeply respect that voice in myself that may be unwelcome, you know, maybe
Hmm.
I want to prove how faithful I am, so I want both feet on the water. But by learning to deeply respect that unwelcome voice that says, "Oh, I'm scared," you know,
Uh
um,
huh. Uh huh.
that teaches me to deeply respect the voice external to me that's uncomfortable as well. Um,
Hmm.
Now, it's not it's not a guarantee, you know, um,
Yeah.
that. But I do observe this that if especially if I'm with, in a community of focusers and we share this understanding, this and this language, if someone in a group setting says, hey, I'm uncomfortable with what's happening here, there's there's a desire that I observe in myself and in other focusers to give that person the space and time that they need to be able to articulate what is it that's happening inside of them that maybe none of the rest of us are feeling. We're all kind of wanting to get on with it,
Hmm.
whatever it might be, and and we learn to be just be have it what we call it a focusing attitude, to just be in that space of. I think a focusing attitude is very much about being okay with not knowing,
Hmm.
being when I went to the Focusing Institute summer school a number of years ago when before I was in this position. I've been in my position at the Institute for 2 years. So prior to that, I would go to the Focusing Institute summer school every year. And in the first several years, Jean Genlin attended, and once during the week, one afternoon of the summer school, and a phrase that he said that has stuck with me all these years is that the inarticulate is more powerful than the articulate.
Mm. That the inarticulate is more powerful than the articulate.
Yeah, that when something is there and it's murky. Um, I don't remember the context in which he said it. I just know that it's resonated with me all these
Hmm.
years. That um, it is so rich, it's so rich, and which is why it takes some time. That felt sense, that unarticulated felt sense, it takes time, sometimes weeks or months or years, often no
Yeah.
time at all, like what you and I were saying earlier. Often it's been just waiting for our attention.
Yeah.
And the moment we turn toward it, it relaxes um, and resolves and allows us to go forward, as you were saying earlier. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the it takes a long time, but in any case, it's powerful and full of meaning. It's full of. It's almost like I'm getting the vision now of like an atom,
Mm-hmm.
and all the
Mm-hmm.
power that got released when they figure out how to split an atom, and
Yeah.
the enormous and very destructive in the case of the nuclear bomb, but the enormous amount of power that's contained in this fuzzy little thing that's moving. And um,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure if that in any way is answers what you were asking. It's what all of that comes to me in response to what you were asking about being with others in their unknowing, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, and I don't know what they're experiencing inside. And so one of the things that is a when one learns focusing, one of the tricky things is to learn to be the listener and to really learn. Um, the way I was originally taught, we really did not offer language to people for. I've
Mm-hmm.
learned to relax around that. The way I learned it was somewhat rigid and never offering language, only reflecting the language that I heard the focuser use. Um, and I've learned
Yeah.
over the years to relax around that and go into my felt sense and see if my felt sense offers some language that seems like it resonates with the other person's felt sense. But to be very ready, if you watch Gene Gendlin in his, there are some videos on YouTube where people can see Gene working with people, and he's very quick. If he does offer some language, he's very immediately abandons it if they say, no, 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 that's not right.
Uh-huh.
So there's some value if I think I know what the other person is experiencing. I've learned that there can be some value in a focusing setting to maybe offer, but that's a real skill that it's usually better off not offering, because we think we know. This is another thing I've learned with focusing. Before
Yeah.
focusing, I thought I thought I knew what other people were experiencing. But what I learned in focusing is that if I let them have the space to articulate, I'm often like gobsmacked.
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah. Yeah.
idea that was what was going on with that person.
Yeah. I've always sort of held the belief that less is more when it comes to reflecting, and trying to be precise with someone's language is the best way to let them check and see if that is the thing, and that can allow process to sort of continue to move.
Yeah, because they don't even know right away. That's where the whole idea of in Gene's original book, Focusing, the 6 steps that he originally laid out, which were just what he was doing at the time. He's very quick to say that those 6 steps that he put in the focusing book are, can and should be abandoned if they aren't useful. But in the original focusing book, he talked about having a handle word and then resonating. So the person checks inside, am I feeling depression? Is that what I'm feeling? Let me check, so then they go back and forth. No, it's not depression. It's more disappointment. And then, um, yeah.
Yeah, but just being able to sort of refine and become sort of more and more precise on zeroing in on really focusing on thing that thing that it is in that moment, because often we don't know. We even think we know,
Yes.
and then, like, even if we come to a focusing session with something we think we know. Like I'm identified with something in me that was angry today because, but going into that, it might be connected to something else entirely. It's like, oh, that was it. And there's these sort of discoveries that happen that feel kind of magical for the individual. And I'm sure you've had the great honor, as I have, of sort of sitting with someone's process as they have those personal moments of epiphany. And you don't know what happened, but you know that something big has happened for that person.
Yes, and yes, yes, yes. And what I'm really wanting to add to that is I, as the listener, do not have to understand it.
Right. Right.
I only am there to be present, to be a support, to be a witness, to hold the space for them and reflect back if they want it reflected back. Or
Yeah. Yeah. And there, for me, that experience has just been very humbling, a moment of absolute gratitude that I could be present for something like that in someone's process. That it's. I had an acting teacher once who's used to say, you know, the best actors are just very private in public,
mm,
and it's being present for you know, to relate it to, if you've been to a great play and, you know, been right there with the actor on the stage. um it's kind of that sort of knowing that person is experiencing something and just witnessing it, and not having to live it for them or do anything really, but be present and be in that space with them. And that's all, you know? Yeah. Wow.
yeah, yeah, to just be with them in that space. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
I'm really enjoying our conversation.
Me too. Me too.
Maybe I just wanted to sort of take a moment to ask a little bit about what's happening at the institute and what some of the plans are, and what you're kind of excited about when it comes to the Focusing Institute right now.
Ah, great. Thank you. Okay. So we are still very much in a transition place, a beautiful, murky, focusing-y sort of uh, space. Which it's actually, as I say that, it's difficult, even though we are, focusers at the institute. It can, and even though we can have enormous patience with ourselves as an individual or with another focuser as an individual, uh, I'm noticing how it can be very difficult to allow an institution like the Focusing Institute to be in a murky place. There's
Hmm.
a lot. It raises a lot of anxiety. So and thank you. I've never quite articulated it like that. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have articulated that just now. Um, so we are in a bit of a murky place because Gene Genlin and his wife Mary Hendricks, who died suddenly about a year ago, sadly, they were the really they headed up the institute until the end of 2013, and then there was a director prior to me who had been there for many years, and so there was a big change at the end of 2013. So we've just around 2 years past that. We're into the post-founder led. organization. And people who know about organizations know that it's always difficult for, or typically, I should say, difficult for organizations after the founder gives up the whatever amount of control the founder had over the organization. It's like now we have to, now the little birdie has to leave the nest, and so there's but I'm very, very proud. Is that the right word? Proud, happy, impressed, some word like that, about the way that the Institute has managed so far the transition. We So I came in as executive director, and we formed a board, a new board. There'd always been a board, but now the board is really in charge without Jean and Mary, being on the board. So it's a different experience, and we formed a sort of sister leadership group called the International Leadership Council to work with the board. So I'm excited and frightened, as one is in these murky places, to discern our way forward. So there's a lot of reorienting to still happen. And everybody wants it to have happened. As I say, it's difficult, even though we're focusers, to allow ourselves the time and space needed to let our collective felt sense find the way forward. We're having a international meeting in Cambridge, England, in the summertime, and those are always opportunities for the international community to come together and discern further our way forward. And our board and our International Leadership Council mostly are going to be able to be present there. So I'm excited. When you ask what I'm excited about, I'm excited about how over the next, a lot of people don't like to hear me say that it will take at least a couple more years. A lot of people don't like to hear me say that, but I know that if we really are allowing our felt senses to lead us, it'll be at least probably a couple more years before we really kind of find a new normal, which of course we won't want that to be frozen either. But right now, I think we're sort of with that 1 foot in the water. We're in that space of 1 foot on the water and 1 foot in the boat. So I'm excited to see how we collectively navigate our way forward. A big concern is that we are an international institute, and we are an international institute, and we are located in the United States, and we hear a lot from from the international focusing community that we all really want a truly international organization. And how do we accomplish that when we are an association that's legally constituted in the United States, and English sort of by necessity is the international language, how do we really truly be international? I'm very excited about how we will find our way forward in that way, because one of the really exciting things about the Institute is its international character. Our board, we have this board and the International Leadership Council, and the board, there are 3 different countries represented on the board, and 6 different countries represented on the International Leadership Council. And the six countries represented on the International Leadership Council do not include the United States. So we have a total of 9 different countries represented on those 2 bodies. And so I'm very excited about that. And I'm also very excited, the second thing I would say is in how we will be using technology going forward.
Uh-huh.
to make focusing more available. We're doing more and more online classes through
Mm-hmm.
the institute, and how we can use technology to connect focusers with one another all over the world. But even just we had a class a few days ago that was given online, just a 2-hour class, and it was pay what you can. So that excites me too, that
Mm-hmm.
we're making them available, just whatever people can afford. And the woman who led the class was in Canada, and we had people from, I think, 9 or 10 different countries on the call. And there was somebody who emailed me afterward from Vermont who said, "Thank you so much. I feel so isolated in Vermont, and it's
Yeah.
such a pleasure to be connected." And here you and I in this interview, you're in Italy and I'm in New York. And
Yeah.
so I'm very excited about how technology can connect us and allow us to make focusing, again, to use Mary Hendrix's words, to make focusing more findable.
Yeah.
So those are the two main things that come to mind about what I'm excited about.
Mm. It's focusing's very bright future. And I love that term, to make focusing more findable. That's certainly what I'm trying to accomplish with these conversations, and hoping that people who can listen to them can better understand focusing, the way of being, what I'm sort of calling living in a focusing way.
Mm-hmm.
And just to see who connects to this energy that is focusing,
Mm.
which is beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's natural.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that Mary Hendricks also really emphasized. It's just a natural process. It was developed because Gene Genland observed what some people did naturally, and he wanted to make that, he wanted to make it more available so that people who didn't do it naturally could learn to do it, and for the people who did do it naturally to be able to find their way there again, you know?
Yeah. 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 Wow. Catherine, I just would love to thank you so much for taking your time to be with me, to share your insights and your experiences. I really, really deeply appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I've really, really enjoyed talking with you, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be on this podcast. It
Yeah.
really, yeah, it really is everything, that I was talking about, being excited about connecting internationally, connecting with people out there. So you're doing it. So thank you for letting me be part of what you're doing.
You've been listening to the Focusing Way podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm your host, David Battistella. Please take a moment to visit our website at thefocusingway.com.